I'm Steve Abercrombie. I'm the faculty coordinator for the Sustainable Building Science Technology program at South Seattle College. And we're about almost a 15-year-old program now that was founded really to offer opportunities for folks with traditional technical building degrees to earn a bachelor degree with a focus at the convergence of sustainable and green buildings, technology, and emerging and 21st century or professional skills. If you can see my screen in front of you, like I was saying to some of the early birds here, nothing better for me than to go in front of a national audience and try a brand new technology. Love being on the bleeding edge, and so I am trying this technology. It's an interactive presentation technology called Mentimeter or Mentimeter. And so if you would be so kind, could you go ahead and either shoot a snapshot of the QR code in front of you, go navigate to menti.com and enter the code 8811-5660, or click the link I just posted in the chat. And this will let you go ahead and pull this presentation up. And I'm going to ask you for a little bit of audience participation as we go along. So Larry and Peter asked me to create a roundtable where we could get some feedback. And so with that, first thing I'm hoping to know from you is, where are you from? And I really apologize for folks that are coming from elsewhere in North America or outside the continental U.S. I had to fit something on the slide, so I went ahead and dropped a U.S. map on here. But I would really just love to see a representation of where different people are at across the country right now. Great, good representation. We're seeing folks on the West Coast, folks on the Southeast, number of people from the Midwest. So great. Yeah, okay. I see somebody way out in the Atlantic. So that's what I was going to say is, if you're not here, put yourself out there. But let me know in the chat. Drop a note in the chat and let me know where you're at. Unless you're out, I don't know. It's a little far out for the Barrier Islands there, but maybe that, or some good cod fishing. So I'll give this a couple more minutes, and then I'll jump into my presentation itself. And I'm really hoping to get feedback from everybody here. I've been working with smart buildings and thinking about Jens, Denmark. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. I think you're taking the award for furthest virtual miles traveled, and I guess it's only probably about 9 or 10 p.m. there. So thank you for staying late into your evening to join us. So like I said, I've been working at the convergence of workforce development, economic development, and smart buildings now for about a decade. Here we've had a lot of experiments within the greater Bonneville Power Administration area of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, and particularly within the city of Seattle, around an acceleration of new buildings that we're classifying as smart buildings, and trying to understand, how do we backfill the needs of the operators to make these buildings run efficiently. I spent my early career as a sustainability consultant with a very strong focus on the design of green, sustainable, and smart buildings. And what I came to realize through that is, we were delivering buildings with amazing potential to operate with near zero net energy or beyond zero net energy capabilities, grid interactivity, amazing green features. And what was happening again and again is, as those were being delivered, we were reaching a point where we didn't have the operator, crew, cadre training, et cetera, in order to be able for those buildings to be able to realize their potential that was coming on board with the design phase. So with that, I really have focused the last decade of my career teaching in sustainable building science technology, and trying to understand, what do we need to do to develop the workforce to support these smart buildings. And cramming for this presentation, I did what anybody in 2024 is going to go ahead and do, and trying to figure out what was a smart building, I asked AI. So a couple of different places. I went out to Runway Machine Learning. I didn't have enough credits. I'd burned all my credits to ask DALL-E to generate a cool smart buildings rendering. And I got some really interesting stuff. I was really excited at the lower right. I thought I got a really nice infographic that I was just going to be able to blow up on the screen here, and it was going to tell me all about a smart building. Then I started digging in and realized it is worse than ipsum lorem text on there. It is instead just a bunch of gobbledygook that was pasted into something that almost looked like a really cool infographic. So I realized if I'd been actually one of my students jamming for the answer that was due that afternoon, they would have been in deep, deep trouble being able to get generative AI to give me an answer. So I went over to my old stalwart that didn't need credits and said, hey, ChatGPT, tell me what's the definition of a smart building? Because the thing I have to say is I have a lot of these conversations out in the space with people that are working in smart buildings, either with smart buildings in their service offering name, in their titles, or otherwise describing themselves as working in smart buildings. And I almost never get the same answer for what is a smart building. And the presentations today that I heard were amazing. But again, I didn't hear a real convergence of a clear definition of what is actually a smart building. So ChatGPT told me that a smart building is a structure that incorporates advanced technologies and integrated systems to enhance the overall efficiency, performance, and user experience. These buildings leverage various sensors, automation, and connectivity solutions to monitor, control, and optimize various aspects of their operation. Super cool, but in many ways that still describes probably any building that we're bringing online that that has a modern building automation system and some other elements. And I really want to try to understand from a workforce perspective, first of all, I think we got to define what the smart building thing is in order to be able to define what we're trying to train, what we're trying to design, what we're trying to bring people to. So I also saw here another set, and this is another group that's a Telecommunications Industry Association that I thought gave us a nice little better framework for the elements that come together. When I define smart buildings in my teaching, and particularly my professional teaching, I rely very heavily on integration because I believe that integration is one of the core elements of a smart building, moving beyond the traditional siloed systems that are usually in most discussions around energy efficiency focused on building automation system, HVAC building automation systems, and starting to talk about the integration, interconnected systems, as well as external communication of a number of other layers and systems. The interesting thing that I found when I started to look at this definition that was coming from Telecommunications Industry Association and has been picked up by several National Institutes of Standards and Technology groups is that they are really then moving on to the value proposition of a smart building, creating building services as a system. And that I found fascinating that leap, whether that is actually a definition. I think it's very valuable from a commercial perspective to think about services as systems. But is that really the definition of a smart building? I talked to another expert that I really respect in the field, and they said that they really believed that the definition of a smart building was all about autonomous operation. You didn't have a smart building until you had an event where the building was able to operate autonomously for an extended period without internal or remote human input. So I also thought that was a cool definition, but then I realized for me, the best way possibly is go ahead and ask you. So up in front of you, you should have a ranking. And this was a combination of feedback that I've had and some of the elements that I saw from AI on maybe what are 8 different elements that we see that define a smart building. So I was hoping that different people here would be able to go ahead and rank what you see as the potential most important elements that are in the definition of a smart building. Is it the integrated systems definition? Is it autonomous operation? Are JEBs or grid-efficient interactive buildings? Is it the grid interactivity that defines a smart building? On-site renewables? Does a smart building have to have on-site renewables? Are on-site renewables a defined element? What about Internet of Things connectivity? I often see a lot of that, and we go back and forth with my students on whether IoT connectivity is in fact a requirement. Then what about automated fault detection and diagnostics? This comes up again and again in the definition of smart buildings. Remote management, and then finally, agility and future-proofing. A lot of the definitions and discussions I've seen relate to agility and future-proofing as being the elements of smart building. And thank you very much for folks jumping in here. We're really starting to see a number of different things pop up. So we'll give this a couple of minutes and see what you all say as the definition of smart buildings. And hey, there's no right answer here. Just because I pushed integrated systems as my definitions, please bump me off. Please pick something else that's better. The thing I hate more than anything is I say that to the students, and then instantaneously we do a quiz, and they parrot back the one thing that I just said. I'm really hoping for folks to challenge my definition or estimation. So, okay, yeah, we're seeing some good things pop up. So integrated systems is still in the lead, but automated fault detection and diagnostics, remote management is coming up with grid interactivity third. Autonomous operation. Oh, there we go. So as we're getting different folks coming in here, we're seeing some different items move up. This is a really fascinating feedback, and thank you so much. So again, it looks like that definition of the integrated systems is up here and strong. Love seeing the automated fault detection and diagnostics, and I think that there's really robust discussions going on too of what does that mean, and what does that mean in the combination with our integrated systems in our smart building. Is this just AFDD in the context of HVAC and advanced lighting energy technologies, or are we starting to see that being integrated across multiple systems? The other thing that I like to make a comment to, and I purposely left out of this discussion, is a lot of the discussion I'm seeing in the community is questions of artificial intelligence and machine learning being integrated. And I'm not going into that in this presentation, but I think where that sits in this implementation is a very important market question, and what our relationship is with educating technicians in that space, I think is very, very valuable. I'm currently working with a vendor that is taking a pretty unique approach to smart buildings, where they have an edge-based platform that is doing machine learning independent of traditional control systems. It actually has a broad assumption that in particularly K-12 schools and higher ed, we don't have the ability to maintain sensors and control sequences in an optimally efficient way. So they're building a basic physics model outside of the traditional control system, acquiring points, and then just doing essential zone controls and power management as their value proposition for a machine learning-based smart building. So I think it's really interesting to understand how does that play, and is that a smart building, and what's the application there versus a fully enabled AI or machine learning-based smart building system. So thank you very much for this feedback. I think it's it's really valuable to kind of see that the integrated systems, AFDD, grid interactivity, autonomous operation, and then remote management, agility, and future proofing are the highest things. And I tend to agree. IoT and connectivity and on-site renewables, while important, are often not what we're seeing as the highly ranked definition of a smart building. So the next discussion that I think is pretty interesting in the workforce development space right now is, should we be taking a technology-first approach when it comes to workforce development and training in smart buildings? And the question that I have there is, we obviously, from my perspective, and I think I hear this broadly throughout collaborators at the BEST Center, we're struggling to market. We're struggling to get folks into programs, into HVAC programs, into automation programs, otherwise. And when I talk to folks coming through, I talk to folks in K-12, I talk to students coming through, and I see the examples of successful programs that really are marketing. One of the things I see is they're able to go ahead and grab attention with some of the very cool things that we see being deployed, like microcontroller processing, like sensors and automation, like robotics processing, and getting to people in middle school or early high school and being able to link those cool activities with the things that we do in buildings. This goes back to an experience that I had, which was early on as the Microsoft campus rolled out their initial smart buildings deployment. And Daryl Smith, who was leading that deployment, has since gone on to several other technology leaders to do their strategic developments. He said, one of the problems that I have is when I go to a cocktail party and my wife describes what I do, she still describes me as a janitor. And that, I think, is one of the problems that we have, is that the opportunities in buildings are not seen, particularly in smart buildings, as technology centric. And with the opportunities that we have to really deploy advanced skills, do as much as we're seeing with advanced electronics and computer engineering, and in a dynamic environment where you're working with people, you're working with technology. And so I gave the slide up here in front of us to kind of, put an exclamation point on that. Is do students want to do what's on the left? They want to do cool things with robotics, with technology and otherwise, or do we want to lead with what's on the right? Do we want the belief that they're going to be crawling into these spaces and dealing with this equipment? Now, that is really my question for you is, can we grow technician programs by marketing attractive technologies in smart buildings? Do we hook these people with sexy technologies, or is that a bait and switch? We work in existing buildings, and if we get these people in thinking they're doing robotics and they're doing really cool stuff, and then they do have to go ahead and punch some tubes on the boiler, or they do have to crawl in somewhere even just to replace a controller, are we missing the point, and are we going to actually just have a flight of folks out of what the reality that we painted is? So I'm really interested in you. What do we do? How do we market, and do we use these attractive technologies? And I'd love any comments. Anybody have any thoughts that they want to voice in or add to the chat on this dichotomy? Am I even getting it right?
It's a tough question, because I think what's out there is that computer programmers, software engineering is the place to be right now. Even though if you're working with BAS systems, you're doing essentially the same type of work. We have a really difficult time bringing women into the industry, because there's an industry stereotype of what a building engineer looks like. And the whole BAS field, which combines a knowledge of mechanical systems with that computer focus, is very difficult to attract people who are smart enough to do that type of work and have computer savvy skills, I think, as well as an understanding of mechanical systems, which is also necessary. So it's a complex marketing problem, and one which, as we've heard over the last 2 days, there's a severe shortage of BAS technicians, which is sort of at the heart of smart buildings.
Thank you. And I absolutely agree, and kind of echoes exactly the experience that we're seeing. Others have thoughts about this. What are others seeing about this when it comes to marketing? And I think particularly marketing to bring in more diverse populations of folks on a gender, sexuality, and race basis into BAS roles and then into smart buildings roles.
Yeah, Steve, I think also, if I can just use my own background as an architect as an example, and I think I'm joined here by a few other architects, Alexandra and Charlie, right? We all went through what I considered at the time a hybrid discipline, right? Albeit it probably reached into other disciplines within the liberal arts. And of course, technology as well, right? And if you just use BAS as some kind of paradigm, right? You've got to have some IT skills, and you've got to understand physics, and then you also need to understand electricity and electronics. I think it takes a very kind of special kind of person to want to embrace all that knowledge, right? And I don't think that the technology itself, while that's a way in, I think that ultimately kind of the truth reveals itself as you try to, get on the job, right?
I think the technology, there are a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, but But there are people who don't really want to be a computer programmer. They don't want to sit in the dark room, or sit at a desk all day, but they're interested in the technology. So it's not a bait and switch to say, well, you get to walk around a construction site and you get to go out, and do stuff, but you're doing the cool stuff also. So I think it's good to point out that there's a lot of really interesting technology that's going on. And oh, by the way, it happens in construction sites and in building existing buildings and all of that. But I don't think that's a bait and switch. I think you really have an option besides sitting behind a desk. So, but that doesn't particularly appeal to the demographics that we're missing necessarily. It appeals to a lot of the guys that are, thinking about construction anyway.
Connie, I think you make several really salient points there. And, one shout out, I haven't seen Deb here. I haven't spoken with Deb, but in the past, I think Deb Hall has had a recruiting tool where she's used a sensor-enabled Barbie house, I believe, at different events to really be able to attract particularly women and girls to see the opportunities there, and has had a lot of luck with getting, creating initial interactions and attracting folks in with that approach. And I think that's a strong opportunity too. Any other thoughts? Anybody else have experience in kind of what it takes or how we attract folks?
Well, Steve, I would make one other comment, and that is that we have had enormous difficulty retaining faculty who have BAS experience or smart building experience, so to speak. I think students are really aware who their instructor is, and do they have that inside out knowledge of the field. At Wake Tech, we've lost several of our instructors back into industry. We lost another instructor from the Midwest back into industry. The pull of industry in this field is so strong. And all of the baggage that comes with being an instructor and learning outcomes. And now we're changing instructional platforms, and you've got to move everything over here, and just the bureaucracy. I just want to go to my job and do my job, and they pay me well, and I have an expense account. And, the private sector is really attractive. People really have to have a passion for teaching. And I think that transfers to the students and transfers to the program. And it's very hard to find that and build it and cultivate it. Teaching is a very special, very valuable profession that is grossly undervalued in many ways when compared to the pull of the private sector.
Here, Peter, and you're preaching to the choir in some ways. I'm blessed that I have a great group of adjuncts, and I'm scared all the time that they're going to tell me that they can't come back and teach for me because I have we have almost all of our folks working in industry, and so I have folks with data analytics experience and BAS experience that are teaching some more of my technical classes, but they often will forward me their what they get sent on LinkedIn. And, we don't pay our adjuncts extremely well on their per hourly rate. And if you see the consulting, contracting, or other offers that they get, let alone the job opportunities, just by showing BAS or Smart Buildings experience on LinkedIn, you can understand why that pull can be so strong for them right now with the dearth of folks. So I think that that speaks to me too. I think we have a big opportunity to also recruit new people into the teaching ranks and to really build and mentor and more women, more folks of color into those ranks, so that's going to give representation and help create a virtuous cycle to to build a diverse workforce. So thank you there. Well, moving on, another question that I have, and this kind of keeps coming up for me, is the breadth of skills necessary in order to work on smart buildings, and what is the minimum technician skill set? I had a really illuminating conversation a handful of weeks ago with a leading smart buildings provider that I've worked with for a long time, and they kind of gave me a call and said, "Hey, we need new people," and I'm hearing this broadly in the industry. More and more, I'm hearing industry saying, "Hey, we're not seeing a pipeline of folks coming out from our traditional recruiting paths. We're building our own training." And every time I'm talking to different organizations, they're often giving me a call and saying, "Hey, we're thinking about building our own training programs." Phil Zito just did a live stream about this and pros and cons of industry building their own training programs. And I think that's worth watching. But that group said, the folks we're looking for, we want absolute comfort with million line type data. We need them doing we need them SQL fluent. It's really nice. Please have them speaking either R or Python coming out. We'll train the rest, but we need a mechanical understanding, and then we need that set of data skills. And that's kind of our entry level, and training expectation, and we'll take them from there. And that might be an outlier in what we're training for in the technician space, but in some ways that's, they're calling me for folks with a bachelor, mid-career professionals with a bachelor's degree, wondering if we're training up for that. And I can say we're not. We might get a rare person coming through that has that experience outside, but we're in a 2-year program not able to provide kind of boot camp level SQL, machine learning, or Python type skills. But we are getting more and more cybersecurity and more IT and more computer science educations inside of our traditional community and tech colleges. So part of me is wondering, do we build certificate programs, or do we partner in order to be able to offer folks a smart buildings pathway that would have those skills? So, when we talk about smart buildings, again, it's really that information technology and operational technology convergence that I think defines a lot of what we're seeing with smart buildings, with integration with other things. And I wonder from this group, what are the required minimum skills for smart buildings technicians? And this is kind of open-ended, but what would you say, and what potentially differentiates a smart building technician, if it's appropriate, from a traditional BAS technician or BAS person? Is cyber critical? What IT skills do they need? What else? Well, what are those minimum set of skills for smart buildings technicians? And I'd also love to hear if anybody has any thoughts they want to share, voicing in.
I'd like to invite Charlie or Alexandra to kind of weigh in on, so maybe kind of the transfer of skills from, an architecture curriculum towards smart building, right? I mean, one would think that blueprint reading is a fundamental skill across many trades within the construction industry, right?
Yeah, Larry, I think that's true. And we see, we offer print reading classes in both architecture and mechanical systems. And we see students from a variety of perspectives in there. It's not just our built environment students who are in there. So I think you're right. I think that's one of the entry level kind of threshold skill sets that's required is, so what's this building made out of? I think that's one of the things that you have to know first. I think that goes back to the idea of technology as a hook to get someone involved. We do a lot of BIM stuff, right? So Revit and things like that. But we start them off drafting on a board with a lead holder and vellum, right? So I think building those foundational skills is really important, kind of no matter what discipline you're approaching smart buildings from, whether it's the architecture side or the IT side or whatever it is. I think knowing those basics and making sure that employers and industry folks don't expect a graduate from a 2-year program to come out with master's degree mastery of the breadth of everything, right? We get that occasionally on the architecture side where, well, why can't your 2-year graduate do X, Y, and Z? Well, we only had them for 2 years and we only had so many credit hours available to us. So we did what we thought was most important and most applicable across the board. So anyway, long-winded answer.
No, Charlie, that's fantastic. I'd love to drill in on one item you said there, because it was actually a conversation I had with somebody at Metropolitan Community College last year, and that was that I think they had a traditional program where they started with hand-based drawing, and I think moved away from that. They moved in a BIM world. They decided that those skills were not really kind of core, and we're actually alienating sets of folks in going through the curriculum. What are you finding there?
We have that conversation annually with our advisory board, and debate this every year. And we pretty much stick to our guns with, it's easy to click the buttons on the computer or the mouse or whatever and not know exactly what the effect of that click is. And so we stick with the argument that if you have to draw it with a pencil, or if you have to hammer that 2x4 to the floor joist or whatever it is, doing that and making that baseline connection is really important. And it's sort of the old thing, when I was young, it was calculators, right? So we got to learn how to do the math problem so we know what the calculator answer is giving, if the calculator answer is correct or not, right? So it's very frustrating when you're the one trying to punch the numbers into the calculator and you just want to give the answer. You don't want to know kind of the background as to why the math works or doesn't work. I think it's kind of the same thing, right? So we have to teach those baseline skills, and so we keep presenting that argument, and so far we keep winning.
Thank you. And yeah, I think there is definitely a really strong argument for that. I have to admit, I had to take a professional certification without my Excel formulas last year, and that nothing has terrified me as much as as exit exams for undergraduate as having to go into a high pressure test only with a calculator. So definitely heard there those base skills. Alexander, did you have any thoughts or comments?
I feel like Charlie covered that pretty well. I do notice as an architect, I come at the angle from more of a big picture perspective than the detail side of an engineer. So it's interesting to see the two join, I guess, in the field. So
No, thank you. And I think that is I think that's not, another important thing is kind of the systems connection and how the different disciplines and elements come together, but as well as strategy. And I think that's, one thing that I've seen historically working with architecture teams in smart buildings implementation is that ultimately smart buildings require a big picture strategic implementation frame. And if we are starting from the bottom up, I've seen a lot of examples where we don't have, or we're a lot of last mile problems with system integration, competing specs, competing standards, just a lot of those issues. And so I think that really engaging the architecture team and understanding the core elements of the building, the strategic parts of the building are imminent in delivering smarter and better buildings.
Steve, is there a algorithm driving the font size and so forth in this graphic?
I don't think there is a specific algorithm. I think yes, I think the algorithm is trying to make it fit on the slide itself. So this is a free-form input. So it is just putting it in. It's not a word cloud specifically. So
networking is not the number one thing that people picked.
I don't know. I can't see it on this display, but I'll let you know. I think I would get it. Although based on what I'm seeing, I would think we might have a couple of networking inputs, folks that have said the same. So
yeah.
I think there are a great set of answers here, and just some I'd love to call out. So networking, if we can assume, had multiple inputs. IT appears a couple of times here. I love the insatiable desire to learn, and that is one thing that I do hear, and I don't want to undercut, is that when I talk to employers, more and more of them say, we want folks with a base level of training. We want to know where they're at coming out of your program, but we want to harness those folks that have that desire to learn, because we will train them, and we will work to retain them. When I used to hire, we called it the beaver gene. We actually tested for that beaver gene, or that insatiable desire to learn. So I think it's an important element. But it is also, how do we capture that, and how do we define it, and can we cultivate it? I have seen some really good discussions on, are we able to foster or cultivate that insatiable desire to learn? Some of the others that I see are overarching elements like sustainability concepts, our system insight, systems thinking, building science, building envelope. I think those are all very important. And in our high performance, sustainable and green buildings, we've really got to get those. And then a number of the more core technical elements like data science, HVAC systems, programming logic, IT and OT, mechanical engineering. So, it is a huge bucket. And I think this is one of the interesting challenges, is if we only have folks for a limited amount of time, how do we create pathways where folks can, are we creating opportunities where they can come back and they can build? Because that's the other part, is that, with many of our folks, I'm hearing more and more from my constituents, they want earn and learn opportunities. They really want a minimum of what they need to get to have a viable salary in the workplace. And then they're willing to come back once that's the case. If they have a work compatible program, they'll keep coming back and leveling up their skills. But they're really concerned about being away from the workplace for too long and focusing too much, and even potentially focusing on something as the workplace is evolving and coming out without something that really has marketable skills. So as we're looking at these, one of the things I would call out is, I think a lot of folks that are working in smart buildings, these are not 2 or even 4-year degrees. We're looking at somebody that's really well trained, has all of these elements, plus applied elements of sensor logic, programming, IT. They're gaining additional certifications out well beyond a traditional 2-4 year and on the job training to 6-8 years plus experience. That's really where we're getting people into the automation space. But it goes back to marketing. If I tell anybody, hey, you know what, you need beyond a graduate degree in order to get into the space, I think I'm going to be a lot better. Wouldn't you like to learn to program this robot, and we'll get you $100,000 job that's really dynamic and will last you the rest of your career? So then one more item that I have, and a couple of slides I'd like to share with you, is, are smart buildings a chance to engage adults? This is something that's near and dear to my heart, but it's a conversation I'm having again and again across the academic industry, is, do we have an opportunity to change our thinking about who's coming into our programs? And the call out I want to make is, right now, we are at arguably the peak of US high school graduation. We are not going to see, based on demographic trends, ever increasing graduates from high school. This chart in front of you is showing that it is heading down. Kind of right now, between 2024, 2026, we're seeing the largest total number of in millions of graduates in United States high schools. And so from here, the demographics are not really supporting us, that the traditional pathway of attracting folks out of K-12, there's a lot of competition for those folks. More and more of them are going directly to the workplace. And so we do need to start talking about and rethinking. We've had a lot of success and a lot of attention to dual degree programs, to co-enrollment with high school, to getting folks out of CTE into technician programs. But what about adults? And this should come as to surprise as nobody that's working in the community college space, but we've gotten hammered over the past several years when it comes to enrollments. We've had the slightest bright spot really now with recovering enrollments, but it doesn't make up the major gap that we've been seeing in public two-year institutions over at the right here. That, I hear most of my colleagues and most of my administrative colleagues are talking 15 to 30% drops in enrollment. And this goes back really a little bit earlier, but starting right in the pre-COVID times, we really saw significant drops in enrollment. And while we're seeing a slight uptick, it's not really significant. The other thing is, when we look across the industry landscape, we're seeing this is across all sectors. Less and less folks are going into higher ed. And so going into higher ed immediately. So what do we do? What opportunities do we have there? One thing that's being talked about a lot in my area, particularly because you see a number of these large companies, Amazon and Microsoft, being for us in the broader Seattle region, two of our really significant employers. This is a chart showing the 2022 and 2023 tech layoffs that we had. And we're seeing that we had really significant tranches, hundreds of thousands of people that have been laid off in tech. And as I'm talking to people out in the industry, what I've heard is a lot of those folks ended up with a cushion. A lot of them had, between unemployment benefits and savings or partner benefits, they had a cushion where they had a period to look for another job in the space. And I'm hearing more and more now that those that were not successful in landing their next job are really starting to feel the strain of considering a career pivot. So the question I have to the group is, do we have an opportunity here in two realms? One is around adult learners. Do we have an opportunity to take folks that have base skills, that have been in other industries, et cetera, and get them into our programs in order to train them up and build upon their transferable skills for smart buildings? The second is, what opportunities do we have for folks that were working in tech? Presumably, they have some of those minimum skills that we saw before. Can we go ahead and attract them into building automation and smart building related fields? So just asking you for a quick multiple choice here is that, can community and technical colleges attract and retain adult IT or technology workers for smart building deployment? Do you think, that no high school grads, no, we really should have high school grads entering our programs? Yes, we should focus on adult learners. We have a big opportunity to retrain tech workers, or, Skynet is coming. It really doesn't matter at all. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. And, in some ways, I do hear that too. One of the things that I hear as I'm talking with the innovators in my space, and I'm talking with startups, is they're saying, hey, look, and some folks in workforce development, they're saying the disruption we're going to see from AI and from machine learning, we have to be careful to oversell what we're doing, because this space for smart buildings workers is going to get disrupted much more quickly than we think. Any thoughts there? Anybody have any narrative thoughts on whether that's the case? Is that a perspective anybody's heard, or anything else?
Well, Steve, I can tell you that in the big recession of 2009, I believe it was, United in the Bay Area here laid off quite a few people from the maintenance, aircraft maintenance and power plant. Those people did very well in our HVAC program because they had a lot of the core mechanical skills already. They understood electricity. They had some familiarity with electronics. I can't say whether or not they migrated into the BAS space successfully, but they certainly had some very strong baseline knowledge to readily learn on the skilled trade side. So that would be the challenge with these people laid off from the IT sector, is really to convince them that this field is a very strong field, a growing field, and a lucrative field, but you will have to learn some mechanical skills along the way. And we know you're used to sitting at a computer all day, but you'll be able to get out of your your happy space and work with your hands a little bit and do some other things,
Uh,
as I think Connie was mentioning.
I mean, I'm kind of not sure what would be the pay gap there. Are we talking about people who are making like 180K and they have to make like 90K now? Or are I don't have a sense of, and it's probably regional because people, tech in different places may make different amount of money. But I don't have a good sense of, how they, what hit they could take on income.
I would say, Marco, that, the tech sector for kind of an entry level software engineer without a lot of experience, who will probably be some of the first people laid off, they're making in the 80,000, 90,000. The advantage they have is that a lot of them are remote, so they can go to the gym, they can go climbing or jogging, they can work from their living room. So there is that advantage. But I would say that the level of compensation is going to be about equivalent. It's going to be very similar, not maybe for a senior software engineer, but for a junior software engineer migrating into the BAS space, it's going to be about along the same lines, but they will have to be place-based. That's the big difference.
Well, I'm gonna change my answer.
No, I think that's fair. I did some labor analysis for the Seattle region last year, and it was relatively similar. Depending from median software engineering to an equivalent building engineering role was looked to be about a 5 to 8% pay drop. And so there are the place-based elements, but it's something else that I've heard said too, is that more and more people some people are looking for those remote jobs. Some people are actually looking for more connected jobs now too. And so that's actually an opportunity to have structure, to go in, to interact with people. So that there is a subset of folks that is very attractive to. One other comment that I've found that is pretty interesting, a lot of my students come through skilled trades, and they are journey or master level folks that are often looking to hang up the tool belt or move from experienced HVAC, experienced electrical into consulting type roles, where they're looking to get out of a truck, looking to get out of a van, set their own schedule, be able to be there for family, not be required to work the long days or on Saturdays. And it's a conversation I'm having all of the time, because many of those folks are making, this is a Seattle market, which is a very, pretty lucrative market, similar to California. Many of those folks are pushing 200K with overtime in those roles. Their starting wage there before overtime is 60 an hour for journey electricians HVAC. And they're looking at a significant pay cut coming into, because they lose the overtime, and they're coming into a mid-level consulting where they really have to demonstrate they have the professional set of 21st century skills. And I have a number of folks that are willing to take that plunge. They see a recoup in 3 to 5 years. They get back into a similar salary range, but they realize they have to, in order to take a lateral move, take a big pay cut. And it is a big swallow for some folks, though, because they're dependent, and housing is not cheap. So they have a mortgage, they do have commitments.
Interesting.
In some ways, if you look at sort of a more longitudinally with the IT sector, we see that it's pretty volatile.
Yep.
And it has highs and lows, whereas the building sector, absent COVID and what that has done to the real estate market, but it doesn't seem to have dampened the demand for skilled technicians in the field. And as you know, the real estate sector, commercial real estate comes back gradually and people come back into the workplace, it can only get worse for finding building engineers and BAS technicians. And if you look at the big picture, the need to upgrade BAS systems, install BAS systems. At my campus, Berkeley, and you look at the BAS system, 2/3 of the buildings are operating a legacy BAS system that has been kept together for 20 years. I don't know.
Yeah, ask Chris.
A couple of buildings, I think Dominic's building has several different systems working in it. If you go to UC Davis, we talked about UC Davis, it has several different versions of Siemens, none of which are current. This field is just going to continue to grow and expand, especially as we try to develop energy efficiency and GEB and smart buildings and more sensors, more data. Whereas the IT sector is going to kind of rise and fall depending. It'll go through its, right now we're going through layoffs in the IT sector, as you were suggesting, Steve.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. I have one more question for the group, kind of seeing we have about 5 minutes left. And, you know, I think that do want to introduce a couple of additional items. And those are for folks that are interested here, if you haven't seen them, IREC and Department of Energy have published 2 career maps that are really valuable. And they are the Green Buildings Career Map and then the Solar Career Map. And sorry, I can share the links, or I'm sure the team can share the links here. But if you just drop into a search engine, DOE and IREC career maps or Green Buildings career maps, you'll pop these up, and they're interactive, and they show the advancement roles and places from entry and mid-level and advanced. They have a set of knowledge, skills, and abilities that are defined, and they include, as you hover over these in the interactive form, they will show you the different job categories and show you the progression paths to those and the skills that are necessary. So I just want to make a call out that if you haven't seen these, they're a really valuable tool to be able to define both workforce development, job categories, and KSAs that are required for those elements. So my last question for the group, and just kind of open it up for comments, is I think this conversation is pretty nascent. As I'm hearing it and hearing it had, I think we're pretty early on, you know, what is it going to look like for us to do workforce development for smart buildings? We know they're coming. We know that all these elements are happening. We know we've got talent shortages. And so we also have major investments, new programs being created at the national level with infrastructure and IRA money coming down. And the question I have is, what is needed from BEST? What is it needed from BEST and other national advocates in order to advance, coalesce, or bring together this conversation nationally around smart building technician training? And would love to either get your input or just get a voice in. Somebody have a comment?
All right.
Oh, now you have your hand up. Go ahead. Did you have a thought?
Sorry, dog madness here.
You know, Steve, I wanted to make a comment while we're waiting for people. Could you go back to that earlier slide of IREC and yeah. So one of the interesting things about this field is that the Bureau of Labor Statistics provides almost no differentiation. What you see when you scan job projections in this field, there's a category called HVAC installers and repairers, and that's it. All of your whole building engineering infrastructure is encapsulated in that category, and there's no differentiation. There's no awareness or modeling of BAS technicians or even people working in building operations. They're all lumped together in a most unhappy way. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that this IREC DOE are almost surrogates for what Bureau of Labor Statistics should be giving us in this field.
No, but that I think is an important call out. I think was, as we go back to that question, a lot of funding from labor, a lot of our local funding that comes from our traditional workforce development organizations is predicated on a quote unquote business case that is using the Bureau of Labor Statistics job categorizations, that SOC codes. And we've actually spent a lot of time using the management analyst based SOC code and justified that is actually the best descriptor for these kinds of roles. But that takes a lot of it takes a long logic chain as you're putting together a justification for support when those traditional Bureau of Labor Statistics classifications don't include kind of this mix of information technology, operational technology, mechanical systems knowledge, architectural knowledge.
Yeah, we've been talking about the BLS and how it needs to kind of get with the times for a while now. I think, certainly there's a question about, okay, how do we get in front of the Bureau to start having these conversations? That's number one. And then, the major outreach effort, right, which hopefully would be supported by various industry players who stand to benefit from the workforce development. I mean, we need to be going out to maker fairs, among other places. I know a few of our colleges, they have these kind of labs in a trailer, right? They take them out to, various fairs and what have you. So I don't know of any kind of recent success stories using those particular sorts of kind of methods. Right, Steve, I mean, does South Seattle have like do you all have like this whatever lab or kind of mini maker fair in a trailer?
We don't have anything portable, and that's been an interesting discussion for us. Is we've been wondering, what does a smart buildings lab even look like? Because as we're thinking about it and talking about it, in and of itself, right, it's kind of it's difficult to visualize once you're outside, when you're not talking single smart building, but you're talking kind of a portfolio set of buildings where you're integrating heterogeneous building automation systems under an overlay. How do you represent that to potential technicians or to potential students to engage them? Because it really is almost a virtual thing. And we have not been able to answer that question. So unfortunately, no big success story, not a nut we've managed to crack.
I'd love to brainstorm about that. We have a lot of technologies that we can potentially contribute. Very, very fascinated by this area. So I'm glad I was part of this discussion. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just add that the career fair is a great point. I forgot that 20 years ago, that's how I actually learned about the controls industry. I was an electrical engineering student, and I met somebody from Johnson Controls at a career fair. I never knew that this field even existed, and I'm very happy I did.
Well, Larry, it's a great point. We're trying to do a big career expo in March, and what we're doing, based on feedback and a successful one we've had, is we're having everybody that's there create an interactive display. So we're trying to attract people basically on, at a minimum, you come spend a couple of hours and do a bunch of things to learn and engage, rather than walk around with resumes and, kind of a high stakes environment. So that's focused on both sustainable buildings and wastewater treatment, and are just in the process of doing it. So I'll report back and see how that goes. And we're trying to get a number of these, number of BAS and other companies there to provide interactive activities for folks in that vein.
Yeah, I would comment that to Larry's point, our friend Brian Lovell in Atlanta got a big grant from Siemens Foundation to do outreach on BAS, and they did a fairly elaborate box truck with lots of bells and whistles on controls. And now they've kind of evolved away from that, and they're doing sort of the last time I checked in with them, they had moved toward kind of a Star Wars approach, more like robotics and manipulation of controls in a way that, and this was for high school outreach, so it can be tricky.
Well, I think Kimberly is reminding us, thank you for applying the hook, that we are at time at just past 2 o'clock. So I really want to thank everybody for participating and for the conversation and feedback. Really helpful for me, and I hope that this hour has been helpful for you to think about smart buildings and technician training. Best Center, any other comments before we wrap up here?
Well, Steve, I will say this: we've been trying to cultivate interest in this arena with NSF, and if we gain more interest, I will certainly be in touch with you.
Would love to talk further.
Okay.
Thanks, Connie. Yep, looks like the Mentimeter worked. I've got some work before I deploy it with the students tomorrow. So. Great. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciated the time today.